Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It is indeed my great pleasure to be in the wonderful district of, this is the Boxing Town area. And I don't know about anywhere called Backlands. And what we've tried to do with the naming of the developments that we're doing is to make them aspirational, meaning the name must represent the vision that you have for yourself and your community. So the Wakefield Mews is quite a lovely name. Yes, yes. And so just by a name, you can literally transform people's views and people's perception. You believe that? Yes, just by changing a name. Once I was at a car mart and I was looking at a vehicle and I saw this youngster looking at me. He was just staring at me, and his mother was nearby. And his mother came over and she said, "Hello, how are you?" And the son came over and he was looking at me and he was looking at me. And then he said, "I know you. I've seen you on TV. You're a politician." And I looked at him and I looked at him and I said, "No, no, son, I am a political practitioner." And then he started to smile. Before he was looking at me with great suspicion and skepticism. But just because I gave him a lovely name, his perspective changed. So it is by changing the name of the community, you can change the perception of the community. But today we are here to talk about housing. And the government of Jamaica has a very comprehensive housing program. We have a housing program that supports the development of private housing. When I say private housing, what am I talking about? There are many Jamaicans who build their houses and have nothing to do with government. Government does not help them. Government does not give them a subsidy. They can build a house on their own. All they require is that the government ensures that they can get their title for their land, and there is road and water in the area, infrastructure. Then there are those who are able to afford their homes, but they can't afford their home all by themselves and right now. So those persons need access to a mortgage. And so we, through the NHT, we provide support for those persons. They are working, they earn an income, but they wouldn't have all the money to pay for it up front. And so the government, through the NHT, helps to support through the provision of a mortgage. And then there are persons who are not working at all. They have no income whatsoever. Shouldn't they also be entitled to some form of shelter? Yes. And it is the case that our society believes that there should be a minimum standard of shelter for everyone. So what happened to those persons then who are on the streets? They don't have anywhere to live. Sometimes you pass them and they are lying down on the street side and they have a little bag beside them. What happens to those people? We call them street people. Shouldn't they need some support? They need shelter. And so the government provides drop-in centers for some of them. Minister Mackenzie has built several across the island. And so they can go in, they can get a shower, they can get a hot meal. Those are the drop-in centers. What about those persons who are indigent or ill and their family can't take care of them? What happens to them? Shouldn't they get some shelter too? Yes. And the parish councils have what is called, P.S. what we call them? We call them the infirmaries. You know that your parish council operates several infirmaries, including here in St. Catherine. And there are families who can't take care of some of their older residents, and some of them are ill, and they have them taken into the infirmaries. And that is a role that the parish council would have under various laws of Jamaica, which mandate the parish councils to take care of the indigent and the poor. It's called the Poor Relief Act. And those facilities, they operate almost like a hospital and a hostel, because there are some persons who are immobile, they can't move, and they need specialist treatment, and sometimes nurses have to be there to support them. So that's part of the government's provision of housing and shelter. But then there are other cases. The family may not be infirm, meaning that they're not ill, or they have somewhere that you could consider shelter, but not quite, because the slightest rain or the slightest wind and that is destroyed. We have had situations, for example, of people living in cars, people living under trees, people living in cardboard box shelter, if you call it that. What happened to those persons? Shouldn't they also be entitled to some form of support for shelter? Yes. They have no income, but their situation is such that they should get help. And so this program, the new social housing program, addresses that segment of the housing need for persons who they live possibly in some form of shelter. They're not necessarily on the streets. They have a piece of land on which they can catch, or with a neighbor, but they just don't have proper shelter. They are exposed to the elements, or they are living in a very small room with 10 and 12 persons in it. Those persons need help too. Now, we don't have the latest census data which would pick up on the status of housing in the country, which would then inform how we structure our budget to support it. But we can estimate, based upon the requests that come in to the Ministry of Housing and to the Ministry of Local Government. And on average, each MP would get about 100 applications thereabout for this kind of social housing provision. And if you were to accumulate that for all 63 MPs, you could estimate that there are about 6,000 households in Jamaica that would really be in need of this kind of support. And of course, what we do when we get these applications in, we have a committee headed by a senior person who is here, Judith Rob Walters, in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. She's a principal financial officer for the ministry. And they go through and check every application to make sure that the person who is applying actually meets the criteria to be considered for social housing. And the criteria are fairly straightforward and simple. One, they don't have the income, the means to improve their housing situation or acquire a house. They have a household that is large, fairly large. Within that household, they have pregnant mothers, young children, or dependents that are elderly. Then we look at disabilities. Then we look at threat from the environment. Some people live in areas that are on slopes that are unstable, areas that could be flooded. And then we look at something, a phenomenon in the Jamaican context, which we call the big yard or the tenement yard, which is a plot of land on which several distinct households live, but in circumstances that are substandard and usually a challenge to health and safety. Where we are talking about now in the proposed development of Wakefield Mews would be one area that we consider to be a big yard for the family. So the people who reside here are probably related, but they have different households. In this particular household, I gather, there are 6 households here, 6 distinct households. One of the household has 6 kids in it. The other has, I gather, another 4 or 5. So it's a large number of persons residing on a fairly small plot of land in circumstances that I won't go into all the details, but it is not just unhealthy, but it is also, it creates antisocial conditions as well, which we must address. And so, if you put all the areas where the state should provide housing to persons who have no income or no means of providing the housing for themselves, we call that social housing. So the government provides social housing with drop-in centers, with infirmaries, and now through the actual construction of homes, and we call all of that social housing, and this particular modality is the new social housing program. Now, we have never had that to this extent before in Jamaica, and we took some time to develop this program over the last 5 years, and now the program is fairly well established. This program is delivering on a monthly basis at least 10 or more homes for needy families. And what we are trying to do now is to scale up the delivery of homes. We want to be delivering in the region of between 20 and 40 homes per month. Now I'm looking at the new social housing team and they are all smiling and saying, boy, they don't know how they're going to do it, but I know how you're going to do it. It can be done, because if you need to deal with 6,000 families, then you really have to ramp up the delivery of the houses. One of the main obstacles for the delivery of these houses is the provision of land. This program does not provide land. The beneficiary has to get access to land and then come to us, and then we build the house. So we are now looking, as our permanent secretary has said, to identify lands that we can put social housing on. Now, we don't want to become a housing developer and be competing with the housing agency and the NHT. So we will look at it very carefully. We actually set a limit that what we are doing, we should build no more than 15 to 20 housing solutions. And then that will be within our zone of operations. What we are doing here today is to build 6 housing units. I believe we are going to be doing 3 3-bedroom units and 3 2-bedroom units here. And so the families who are living in really substandard circumstances, each will have a unit or an apartment for themselves, which will be properly titled, and everybody will be able to say, I own somewhere. Now, the units are going to be given freely to the beneficiaries, meaning that the beneficiaries get 100% subsidy on the unit. But the units are not free. The taxpayers of the country pay for it. And it is a trade-off from the taxpayers to say, if we improve the housing conditions of the people of the country, particularly the most vulnerable and the most needy, then we will reduce the number of households out of which criminals come, out of which people who act in antisocial ways come, out of which people who practice unhealthy lifestyles come. So it is by improving housing that we support the reduction of crime. that we improve the chances of the youngsters, the 14 youngsters in this household, to do better at school. Because when you have to be studying and water drop on your book and mash up your book, when you have to be studying and you don't have a proper place, 6 of you in the room, and you have to draw a curtain, and somebody over the other side doing all kind of other things, you can't concentrate, you can't study. What do you think going to happen with these households? And that is why the taxpayers agree that we should have some funding for social housing to reduce the negative impact of poor housing on the society. So when the beneficiaries get the housing, they have an obligation to ensure that the children in the household actually use these new circumstances to improve their outcomes in school. They have that obligation, because it would be a real waste if we improve the housing and the parents don't pay attention to the child and the child doesn't do well and come out to be antisocial. So when we give these houses over, we expect the beneficiaries to sign a social contract to say, we are going to ensure that we use the house for the purpose given, which is their residence, and we're going to make sure that our children and everybody else does well, be decent, law-abiding citizens who participate and support the development of the community. So today, we are breaking ground for the development of what was once called backlands, for an area which we call a tenement big yard. That will be no longer. And we are going to move this family and move the households here from poverty to prosperity. So while I have you for a few more minutes, and you have been a lovely audience, I saw a statement that said the government has failed to deliver prosperity. And I had to contemplate it very seriously and look into myself to see whether or not, as a government, we have delivered prosperity. You know, there's a Bible verse, I believe it's Jeremiah 9 verse 11, 29 verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you. Right? Plans not to harm you. Right? But to prosper you. And this, I believe, was said when the children of Israel were in a land that was not theirs. And they were all suffering. They were losing hope and losing faith. And the prophet Jeremiah delivered this message. It was a message of hope. And I'm certain that there would be those who would be saying, you know, there's no prosperity that is going to be delivered. But what is prosperity? There are some people who confuse prosperity with pleasure, with short-term happiness. Prosperity is not a moment. Prosperity is a journey. It is the constant progress of impactful and positive transformation of the lives of the people. It is a journey. There are moments on the journey where you will gain some pleasure, but you will also encounter some distress some hurt, some unhappiness, but it is in the conquest of these things that you develop the mindset of being successful and prosperous. And what we have done as a government is to place the country on the journey of prosperity. Indeed, lest we forget that before 2015, the mantra and indeed the theme of the country was about poverty. It was all about poverty. I want you to stop and think. When last you are hearing, a political debate about poverty? What has happened? What was the last thing we have heard about poverty? The last thing we have heard about poverty is that absolute poverty in Jamaica has been cut in half. 16% of the country before was estimated to be below the poverty line. The last measurement of that is that only 8% of the country is below the poverty line. If the ability to earn, even if it is not a lot, but at least you're earning, which means you have some income and you have some independence, in 2015, the unemployment rate was in the region of 13%. What is the unemployment rate today? The unemployment rate is the lowest it has ever been in the history of Jamaica at 3.3%. Meaning that if you were to take the unemployment rate as a probability, you have a 97% probability of being employed in Jamaica. So people who were not employed before are employed now. Of course, we are always going to argue about wages and the level of the wage and so forth. But we are in a better position today than we were a decade ago. Look at this family. They are going to be in a much better position as of today than they have ever been in their life. And it's not just this family. Over 1,000 persons have already benefited from this social housing program. This government has put in train, through the NHT, over 40,000 houses on track to be built. Not promises now. They are in the various phases of construction, from design and development to procurement to contract to construction. 40,000 houses. The people who are going to get those houses, they are going to be in a far better position than they ever were. Let's look at crime. I spoke to the acting officer in charge of the area and several of them in St. Catherine, and they all tell me that crime in this area is down 71%. I mean, isn't that for the people whose lives have been saved? They are infinitely better off. And so we have to confront these things and change our mindset. Because for so long we have been involved in this very long struggle in Jamaica that our default position is that not Nagwan. Whereas things are changing before your very eyes. And you need to change the perspective. You know, I keep saying to people, if you get a glass and the glass is at the half mark, what is it? Is it half filled or half empty? But that tells me how you see life. If your perspective is that the glass is half empty, where are you looking? you're looking at the bottom. But if your perspective is that it is half full, where are you looking? You're looking upward. And that tells me so much about your attitude. Because there's one thing we know about life, is that where you're heading in life is determined by your attitude. So I say to all Jamaicans, including the people who I'm speaking to here, it doesn't hurt to take a positive view on life. Attract positive energy. Give positive energy. Find the positives in everything and build upon the positives. And that is how you're going to achieve prosperity. Prosperity is not a moment in time. Prosperity is the accumulation of positive impacts and change in your life. But if you refuse to see the changes, you will miss it and you will be unhappy. Jamaica is changing in front of your very eyes, day by day by day. The intractable problems that you thought could not be solved, this administration has taken them on with great vigor and courage, and we have made progress that has never been seen before in the history of this country. Whether it is with the murder rate, a lot of you here think that Jamaica's murder rate could not be cut almost in half where it is now. A lot of you grow to accept it, that this is the way it is and the way it will always be. See it there now? We are 41% less murders today than we were same time last year. If you annualize it, when we took over in 2016, the murder rate per 100,000 was about 49 in every 100,000 people would be murdered. We cut that in half. Today, the average murder rate is between 20 and 25 per 100,000. Cut it in half. The world is looking on and saying, I wonder how Jamaica did it. Yeah, well, the story will be written. I'm sure I will have a bestseller when I write that story. The national debt, 140%. When we took it over, it was about 130% thereabout. Cut that in half. It is 68% now. That's the lowest it has been in 30 years. All of you here would have to pay new taxes before this administration came in. The administration before us placed $34 billion of taxes to fund 2 budgets. Every year when budget was being read, everybody in trepidation wondering what new tax is going to come. Nobody don't even pay attention to budget again. Nobody don't even ask no question about budget again. Because it's not a risk to anyone. Everybody understands that this government runs the economy stable. We can give you 10 budgets now, no new taxes. People used to worry about the foreign exchange rate and the national reserves. Our national reserves are the highest it has ever been. Intractable problems, difficult problems. We have taken them on. We still have some way to go. School bus. I know a lot of you here are eager to see the school bus come into your district for your kids to take them to school. I just looked at it and examined it. Wonderful buses. And you're going to have in your community, I'm sure your MP is working with the Ministry of Transport to organize the route. So come September, you're going to have school bus. Never before in your history. But we do it. So, you know, I just have to speak these things. Because if we leave it up to the negative people, they will tell you that the sky is falling. They will tell you that they're going to give you a horse that can fly. And there are some people who believe it. And so my job is not to let the hard work that myself and Minister Tufton has done be trivialized and used in ways that are not accurate. My job is to stand on every platform, cut every ribbon, break every ground, commission everything and hand over everything so that the people of Jamaica can genuinely see the work that their government has done. My philosophy is, by the sweat of your brow, you shall eat bread. By your works, you will be known. And by your performance, you will be voted for. And that is what we are doing. I thank you for listening and thank you for choosing Jamaica.